On the day our triumphant army returned to the capital, my childhood sweetheart and fiancée begged me to voluntarily withdraw from the marriage agreement, to let her pursue her love. I readily agreed, even personally helped her arrange a marriage with the top scholar Lang. Everyone mocked me for being useless, angry that I didn't fight. But besides me, no one remembered that she had clearly died 6 years ago on the Spring Equinox, when she was still carrying my child. Later, on her wedding day with the top scholar Lang, I led troops and personally destroyed her ceremony. Dressed in her bridal gown, she cried out mournfully, "You said you were willing to let me go. Why must you harm me now?" I looked at her coldly, a mocking smile curling at the corner of my mouth. "The one I love is my wife, Qiaoyue, not you, this usurper." Welcome to the magical world of ancient Chinese tales. This is the channel, Dragon's Path Tales. Now, let's begin today's story. When she arranged to meet me on the outskirts of the capital, I vaguely guessed her purpose. Ever since our army's triumphant return, even before reaching the capital city, I'd heard tales of the chief minister's daughter and the top scholar Lang. I just hadn't expected her to be so bold, to demand I withdraw from the marriage myself, thereby earning a good reputation and the top scholar Lang's pity. She said, "I know you care for me, but feelings cannot be forced. I've always thought of you as my brother. Could you bear to see me love without reciprocation?" As she spoke, her expression was anguished, yet her eyes held a certainty of victory, as if she was sure I would agree. I watched her calmly for a long time. She continued chattering, telling how she met He Junxing after leaving home, how they fell deeply in love, how He Junxing, not yet knowing her true identity, promised her a lifetime of devotion with only her, but how he angrily broke it off after her background was revealed. A lifetime of devotion? She dared to believe an offhand promise from a man in dire straits. I didn't know whether to call her foolish or naive. "If this is what you want, I can grant it." Tired of her incessant talk, I interrupted. "But 6 years ago, before leaving the capital, I informed both the chief minister and the emperor. I explained that the army's return date was uncertain, that Qiaoyue need not wait for me, that she could marry whomever she found suitable. I said it could be announced publicly that I had broken the engagement. I had already paved a way out. Why do you still demand that I personally withdraw?" I had left an escape route, yet either this top scholar Lang was too cowardly to fight, or she was determined to force my hand to secure her reputation. I watched her face shift from joy to embarrassment, her lips moving soundlessly. I could only sigh inwardly. "Enough," I said. "Since Miss Shin is unwilling, Xiao will not insist. I only hope Miss Shin remembers. Never regret it." After speaking, I turned and left. The outskirts of the capital on that autumn night were covered in fallen leaves that crunched underfoot. The moonlight was cool as water, just like that night years ago when I climbed the wall of the Shin residence to see Xianxia, who had fallen ill. My engagement to Xianxia began as an oral agreement my mother made upon seeing the Shin family's baby girl, so adorable like carved jade. At that time, both of us were infants in swaddling clothes. When the adults placed us in the same cradle, our hands accidentally clasped together. That handhold lasted 12 years. The next day, at the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet, I fulfilled her wish and petitioned the emperor to withdraw from the marriage. In the grand hall, the music and dance ceased. People whispered among themselves. The emperor asked in a deep voice, "Jingshi, is this truly your own decision?" His words held implication. The sidelong glances of the courtiers fell upon the top scholar Lang, He Junxing. After achieving the highest rank in the exams, he entered the Hanlin Academy, and for various reasons, was exceptionally promoted within months from Hanlin compiler to Hanlin expositor-in-waiting. At this moment, he sat among the 6th-rank officials, head slightly bowed and silent, projecting an image of aloof integrity. I paid him no mind, merely knelt respectfully in the center of the hall to make my petition. Seeing my resolve, the emperor sighed deeply and said, "This emperor understands. Although your betrothal to the Shin girl was never formally ratified with the imperial seal, you both were seen by the Empress Dowager as children, and she bestowed tokens upon you." Before ascending the throne, the current emperor had been exiled to Shu. In a moment of crisis, my mother saved him. The Empress Dowager recognized my mother as her goddaughter. But unlike a princess draped in riches, my mother aspired only to be a general protecting the nation. Thus, she became the dynasty's sole female general. Though they couldn't be mother and daughter, the Empress Dowager cherished my mother as her own child, and naturally, treated me extremely well too. When she learned of my mother's liking for Xiaoyue, even after my mother later said it was just an oral jest, the Empress Dowager still bestowed upon Xiaoyue and me a pair of twin-fish jade pendants. This matter, lacking an imperial edict, was nonetheless settled by the Empress Dowager's gift. Thinking of this, I lowered my head even further and declared loudly, "Your servant has informed his parents. My mother's letter will reach the capital shortly. When it arrives, I will personally explain everything to the Empress Dowager." After a long silence, the emperor finally agreed. As I kowtowed in thanks, I covertly met He Junxing's gaze and saw the triumph he hadn't yet hidden. Meeting my eyes so abruptly, his hand trembled, spilling a few drops of wine from his cup. He quickly composed himself, discreetly wiping away the moisture with his wide sleeve. I withdrew my gaze and returned to my seat. Music and dance resumed. The incident was swept aside, though judging by everyone's varied expressions, tonight's events would likely become fodder for tomorrow's gossip. After the palace banquet, the emperor kept me and Crown Prince Mu Jing in the imperial study. The next day, the imperial edict betrothing He Junxing and Xianxia was delivered to the Shan residence. Instantly, the capital was in an uproar. "Has that Shan girl gone mad? She's giving up the deputy rank 2 general of pacification for a mere 6th rank expositor. That He Junxing gained the chief minister's favor immediately upon arriving in the capital, and was accepted as his protege. I heard Miss Shan strongly recommended him too. Probably, they were already carrying on in secret. At that time, Miss Shan was still betrothed to General Xiao. A relative of mine serving in the palace said the general himself requested the emperor dissolve the engagement. Maybe he knew Miss Shan was involved with the top scholar Lang, so he..." The capital buzzed with talk. These words quickly reached the chief minister's ears. He had barely received the edict when He Junxing was exceptionally included in this year's Hanlin Academy's retention list. It seemed he was willing to sacrifice his reputation for integrity to pave He Junxing's official path. A year after I returned to the capital, He Junxing had already been retained in the Hanlin Academy, becoming a 5th-rank academician, a rise impossible without Chief Minister Shen Zheng's help. The capital's gossip about this marriage shifted from mocking Qiaoyue's lack of discernment to praising her as a tale of spotting true talent. Simultaneously, rumors about my bloodthirsty and cruel nature in Yanmen spread. Some swore I had slaughtered a small Shi tribe, which was why my parents sent me back to the capital for discipline. Many memorials impeaching me flooded the court. Mu Jing was furious. I, however, used the opportunity to propose self-reflection and confinement, shutting myself in the general's residence for peace and quiet. Until before the winter hunt, Xianxia suddenly came to me, hoping I would concede the winter hunt's top prize to He Junxing. "Big brother Jingshi, I know you don't lack the rewards from winning the winter hunt. But if Junxing is to enter the Grand Secretariat, a mere 5th-rank post is insufficient. Father said once Junxing enters the Grand Secretariat, they can finalize our marriage. You will help me, won't you?" She stood holding an umbrella in the snowy winter night, wearing only a thin goose-yellow dress. In her hand was a token bearing the character, Xiao, the birthday gift I gave Xianxia when she turned 15. All Xiao family males receive a family token at their 15th-year hairpinning ceremony, meant for their beloved or lifesavers. The holder could demand the token's owner fulfill a promise, regardless of its nature or danger. So I took back the token and promised the shivering Xianxia, "I will not compete with He Junxing for the winter hunt's top prize." The day before the winter hunt, assassins infiltrated the general's residence, and Crown Prince Mu Jing happened to be visiting. Protecting Mu Jing, I was wounded in my right hand. Though Mu Jing promptly summoned the imperial physician, I was still destined to be a one-armed immortal for a while. The next day, The Emperor sighed regretfully, looking at my arms slung before me, lamenting he wouldn't witness the Xiao family's equestrian archery skills this year. Xianxia, accompanying the Empress, looked at me with moved eyes, truly believing my injury was a ruse to fulfill that promise. But that moved gaze, when turned to He became a proud, boastful look. Xianxia hadn't been idle this past year either. With her medical skills, she cured the Empress's chronic headaches. The Empress doted on her, often summoning her to the palace. Due to my injury, I rode in the Crown Prince's palanquin. He was looking over a letter from a shadow guard and chatting with me. Following your suggestion, I investigated He Junxing. The man is indeed exceedingly strange. Some say he never studied before reaching adulthood, others say he was a renowned child prodigy from miles around. One thing is verifiable. He truly obtained his Tongxing degree only after reaching adulthood, then passed all subsequent exams to become top scholar in just 3 years, topping each list. Mu Jing looked up at me, a playful smile on his lips. He's either a genius or a monster. Jingshi, which do you think he is? I didn't answer immediately. Setting down my hot tea, I met Mu Jing's gaze and asked, I suspect the person who said he never studied is only one, and has a significant connection to him. Am I right, Your Highness? Mu Jing raised an eyebrow, smiling. You've investigated too? No. But a woman once stopped my returning troops outside the capital, insisting the new top scholar He Junxing was an impostor, possessed by a demon seeking to wreak havoc in the court. Mu Jing clearly had heard this too. His expression unchanged, he asked me, Do you believe it? It's not important, I said indifferently. Whether man or ghost, once dead, he is no longer a threat. When we reached the hunting ground, the snow that had fallen all morning had stopped. The winter sun peeked out. It was a rare fine day. Tents were already pitched. After a brief rest, everyone changed into hunting attire. Then the Emperor led the charge on horseback into the forest, officially starting the hunt. Injured, I couldn't join. Unwilling to stay with the womenfolk, I endured everyone's pitying or scornful looks and returned to my tent. Shortly after, disguised as a Crown Prince guard, I slipped silently into the hunting grounds. I only said I wouldn't compete with He Junxing for the top prize. But who said he could win it? To avoid encounters, I didn't walk the ground but traveled through the tree canopy. The arrows I used bore the Crown Prince's mark. This year's prize was the former Wolf King, recently exiled from its pack. Though aged, its strength was still formidable, not prey for ordinary men. But He Junxing clearly had some capability I wasn't aware of. Otherwise, how could a scholar, relying solely on his own skills, be confident of winning once I was out? Just as this thought surfaced, I saw He Junxing heading alone on horseback towards the forest's depths. I quickly followed. There were many animals along the way, but he ignored them, seeming intent on a specific destination. My suspicion grew until I saw the old Wolf King, and suspicion became reality. He Junxing was targeting the prize. I had observed the snow, fresh snowfall that morning covered the Wolf King's tracks. Yet he was so certain of its location. If not tipped off, it truly might be sorcery. Hidden in a tree, stones ready in hand to deflect his arrows, I watched He Junxing draw his bow. His posture was awkward, clearly unfamiliar with archery. Suddenly He Junxing commanded, System, help me aim at that beast. Set hit probability to 100%. Instantly, the arrow that should have been weak shot out with incredible speed, flying straight towards the fleeing Wolf King. In that split second, I threw 2 stones. One deflected the arrow, but it seemed forcibly twisted back towards its target. As the arrow was about to hit, the other stone knocked down a branch that intercepted the arrow's path. The old Wolf King vanished into the forest. I breathed a sigh of relief. Below, He Junxing had dismounted to retrieve his arrow. Seeing his prize escape, he was furious. System! Didn't you say it was a guaranteed hit? What happened? The arrow was silent for a moment. Then he began cursing again. What do you mean, acceptable margin of error? Can you fucking do your job? If not, let another system replace you, Useless thing! Just standing there? Find that beast's location. Do I have to remind you? Did you fucking lose your brain along with the half of the system you split off? Noisy. After enduring He Junxing's tirade, he finally stopped. He stood for a moment, then mounted his horse and galloped in the direction the Wolf King had fled, clearly determined to continue the hunt. I followed, pondering countermeasures. Whatever this system demon was, with it, no matter how many times I interfered, He Junxing could find the Wolf King. And since He Junxing had no martial skills, that lethal shot must have been the system's power. Probably his scholarly achievements were also tied to this system. Hearing another group of riders approaching, I looked at He Junxing charging ahead, threw a stone to trip his horse, and sent him crashing into a tree, unconscious. I didn't want to follow anymore. Better to disqualify him outright. Seeing people discover He Junxing, I turned and left. Estimating the time, I then hunted enough game for Mu Jing before slipping back to my tent. Just as I changed and rewrapped my bandages, Xianxia pushed past the attendant at the door and stormed in. Xiao Jingshi! Was it you who injured Junxing? Entering the tent, she raged, her gaze falling on my injured right arm, suspicion written all over her face. I frowned silently, looking at her with feigned confusion. Her voice was icy. Junxing fell from his horse and was knocked unconscious. Did you know? I lifted my slung arm slightly. I never entered the hunting grounds. How could I know? She glared at me, then suddenly rushed forward and grabbed my right hand. Your bandage looks soiled. Let me change it for you, brother Jingshi. No sooner had she spoken than drums sounded outside the tent, signaling the end of the hunt. Miss Shin, I said, since you are betrothed, it's best not to visit me casually. Don't ruin the reputation you've painstakingly rebuilt. Having spoken, I ignored Qiaoyue's darkening expression and ordered the attendant to escort her out. After having a shadow guard return Mu Jing's belongings, I went back to the front camp to wait for the first day's hunt results. Upon hearing He Junxing's excellent score of 0 kills, the expressions in the crowd varied. The chief minister looked livid, exchanging a glance with Xianxia beside the empress. That same night, the chief minister informed the emperor that He Junxing was withdrawing early due to his fall injuries. Xianxia didn't seek me out again during the remaining 20 days of the hunt. Nor did I re-enter the forest, content to play the cripple. The crown prince was the undisputed winner of the winter hunt. The emperor didn't ask what reward he wanted, and Mu Jing didn't mention it either. On the return journey, I was again in the crown prince's palanquin. The shadow guard sent to tell He Junxing returned with news. After returning to the capital, He Junxing raged at thin air in his home, often cursing the system demon. The strangeness of this behavior unsettled the shadow guard so much he stopped at a temple to pray on his way back. Mu Jing and I reviewed the report, recalling He Junxing's words on the first hunt day. It was clear where the half of the system he mentioned had gone. Mu Jing was 28. As children, he trained in martial arts under my parents, so he, Xianxia, and I were childhood friends together. Xianxia and I trailed him as kids, benefiting greatly. He'd often say, his face bruised from training, I'm your big brother. I'll protect you. He was the second person, besides me, to notice something was wrong with Xianxia. But Xianxia was clearly smarter and more cautious than He Junxing. She didn't speak aloud to the system, instead communicating by copying medical texts and practicing calligraphy. If not for the shadow guard assigned to her having a photographic memory, noticing she copied the same medical text daily but with varying content each time, she might have succeeded in hiding it. What will you do? Mu Jing asked. Right now, it's unclear whether Qiaoyue is controlled by He Junxing or colluding with him. Your Highness, do you know what my mother wrote in her first reply after I informed my parents I'd withdrawn? What? She asked me why Qiaoyue had come back to life. Xianxia was frail since childhood, often ill, and wouldn't see me when sick. So I learned to climb trees and walls early, sitting on the Shen family wall to deliver new storybooks and trinkets from the capital vendors to Xianxia. When she was well, I took her to the outskirts for outings or to the barracks to watch my parents drill troops. Once, she propped her chin and asked if I would follow my father's footsteps and become a general. Of course. Back then, I wasn't even as tall as the army ponies. Unable to lift the soldiers' spears, I wielded a wooden sword. When I grow up, I'll be a great general with glorious victories. Then you'll be my general's lady. I'll take you everywhere with me, just like my father does with my mother. Xianxia blushed, but joined me in imagining our future. She said she couldn't learn martial arts, so she'd study medicine, refusing to be a burden. She studied medicine for 10 years. After turning 12, she forbade me from casually holding her hand. At 18, frequent conflicts erupted at Yanmen Pass. I accompanied my parents to the frontier. Before leaving, I told Xianxia, "When I return, it will be with military honors. If you haven't married by then, I will beg the emperor to grant us marriage. I will welcome you with a procession spanning 10 li. If your heart belongs to another, I will gift you 1,000 acres of fertile land, numerous shops, and 10,000 taels of gold as your dowry. Either way, I will make you the capital's most glorious bride." Xianxia cried until her eyes were rimmed red, yet stubbornly held the reins of my horse, saying, "Xiao Jingshi, a gentleman's word is his bond. You must come back alive to see me. I will wait for you. No matter how long." Later, I stayed at Yanmen Pass for 4 years. Each time I was gravely wounded near death, I remembered Qiaoyue's tear-reddened eyes. Xianxia wrote me letters every 3 months for 4 years. Over those 5 years, note, likely a mismatch in the original text, should be 4 years at front, she told me of the capital's changes, the people's praise for the Yanmen defenders, the new willow buds by the moat, and the longevity lock she hung for me at the temple gate. Her last letter read, "Xiao Jingshi, the peach blossoms in the outskirts have bloomed. Spring has arrived. I pray for your safety." That autumn, the Qidan rebels were decisively defeated. I received the emperor's decree to lead the triumphant army home. The following spring, in the first month, Qiaoyue and I married. The capital was vibrant that day, with a bridal procession spanning 10 li and a grand palanquin carried by 8 bearers. I took a sinecure position, planning to take Qiaoyue traveling. Mu Jing even complained we were abandoning him to suffer alone in the capital. But we never left the capital. On the Spring Equinox, in the peach blossom grove on the outskirts, Qiaoyue collapsed before me without warning, never to wake again. After the funeral, I returned to Yanmen Pass. When I came back, Qiaoyue had returned to life, and no one in the capital remembered she had died. No one remembered our wedding. Everyone thought I had stayed at Yanmen Pass for 6 years. Even my mother, shortly after her first letter arrived, I received a second one. She never mentioned Qiaoyue's death again, only explaining to the Empress Dowager on my behalf why I withdrew. Mu Jing fell into a long silence after hearing this. Resurrection was too absurd a thing. After a long while, Mu Jing spoke cautiously. "How do you know that 10 li of red silk wasn't just a dream?" For a moment my throat felt blocked. I couldn't speak, couldn't find my voice. After a long silence, under Mu Jing's concerned gaze, I finally spoke, my voice dry. "I buried Qiaoyue, with my own hands. Her body was laid in the Xiao family ancestral tomb. I went to see. It's empty now, no grave, no memorial tablet. But—" I closed my eyes, seeing Qiaoyue smiling beneath the red veil. "The unmarked grave for our child in the outskirts peach grove is still there. An unborn child cannot have a proper grave marker. So I buried the tiny closed Qiaoyue, and I had prepared for it in the peach grove, using our childhood wooden sword as a nameless steel. When I returned to the capital, I visited. They were still there, evidence that Qiaoyue and I had been newlyweds, that we had nearly become parents. That wooden sword never rotted. Probably to remind me not to forget the real Qiaoyue. How could I forget? Watching that usurper, the more vibrant she is, the deader my Qiaoyue becomes." As I spoke, I took out a handkerchief and wiped the dust from the wooden sword. Mu Jing stood behind me, staring blankly, lost in thought. After a long time, he stepped forward and pulled out his own handkerchief to wipe it too. I will help you. His voice was muffled, just like when he fought back tears as a child after martial training injuries. I am your big brother. I will protect you both. Shortly after the winter hunt, the director of the Imperial Astronomical Bureau observed unusual celestial phenomena indicating potential danger for the Emperor. Thus, the Crown Prince requested to leave the capital to find the legendary adept who could avert divine calamity. The chief minister seized the chance to recommend He Junxing accompany him. Meanwhile, I went to a Taoist temple for cultivation studies, citing rumors of an ominous star descending upon the capital. During my earlier confinement, I had secretly collected evidence against the chief minister's faction and discreetly passed it to the vice minister of the Court of Judicial Review. Before the new year, the Crown Prince's group returned, accompanied by a youth with the face of a child but hair like crane feathers. The stars of the Purple Palace are dimmed, treacherous ministers disrupt the court and cause chaos. He spoke, his star chart rotating. His eyes, seeming to hold the cosmos, swept over those present, lingering briefly only on me and He Junxing. The Emperor, having reached an age where he deeply believed in gods and heavens, took this very seriously and immediately appointed the youth as imperial astrologer. At the New Year Palace banquet, the Crown Prince highly praised He Junxing's intelligence, noting he had correctly pointed the way many times during their journey and shared many aspirations. The Crown Prince spoke joyfully, presenting himself as He Junxing's patron. He not only credited He Junxing with their success but even offered his own reward from the winter hunt, begging the Emperor to set a wedding date for He Junxing and Xianxia. The Emperor glanced at the imperial astrologer. Seeing his nod, he readily agreed. Instantly, the scene from the mid-autumn banquet repeated itself, though the crowd's looks towards me shifted from pity to schadenfreude. This almost confirmed I was the treacherous minister. After that, impeachment memorials against me flooded the palace like snow. The Emperor summoned me alone to the imperial study. When I emerged, I was sent back to the Taoist temple. Xianxia came again later, bundled up tightly, terrified of being recognized. Only this time, her eyes were full of mockery and disdain. She threw the evidence and list I had given the Vice Minister of Judicial Review at my feet, watching me drown my sorrows alone, and sneered. You thought your investigation was hidden well? Xiao Jingshi, this is the capital, not Yanmen Pass. Your reach shouldn't extend so far. Junxing is different from you. He is destined to hold supreme power. Only such a man can secure the Shen family's position at court. A brute who only knows fighting and marching has no place as the Shen family's son-in-law. Suddenly, her tone shifted, laced with a hint of gritted teeth. Though I didn't expect, even at this point, you'd still prepare a dowry for me. Xiao Jingshi, do you love me that much? Of course. I slurred, heavily intoxicated. I love Xianxia more than anything in this life. She snorted contemptuously, as if hearing a joke, muttering, How dare a short-lived ghost be worthy? Then said softly, Then grant me this wish. Big brother Jingshi, just obediently die here. March 20th, Spring Equinox. Auspicious for weddings. The He family's wedding procession, with gongs and drums, arrived at the Shen residence gate. The bride, led by the matron of honor, boarded the bridal sedan. Some onlookers felt a strange sense of déjà vu. But their attention was soon drawn to the Shen servants scattering coins at the gate. The day was extraordinarily lively. The dynasty's youngest vice minister of the secretariat was marrying Xinjiang, the chief minister's only daughter, Xianxia. Hearing that the crown prince and imperial astrologer themselves would attend, the He household had prepared meticulously, hiring over 100 extra temporary hands. The area around the He residence was also bustling. Many wanted to bask in the new vice minister's glory, and many more lingered just for the spectacle. The matron of honor beamed at the couple standing before her, calling out loudly, First bow to the parents! He Junxing had no parents. Having entered under Xinjiang's tutelage, this bow was still to his teacher, Xinjiang. Second bow to heaven and earth. Just as the couple bent towards the main gate, the crowd outside was dispersed, and officials from the Court of Judicial Review streamed in. The Court of Judicial Review investigates a case. All irrelevant persons, disperse immediately. Shocked, the Vice Minister of Judicial Review, holding an imperial decree, read aloud the charges against the Chief Minister and his faction. Those trying to flee amidst the chaos were subdued by Crown Prince guards disguised as laborers. The Chief Minister knelt, his face ashen, crying out, "Unjust! The Imperial Astrologer is here! He can vouch for me! I have never harbored disloyalty towards the Emperor!" The Imperial Astrologer looked at him silently. He didn't know what to say. The Crown Prince hadn't coached him for this scenario. "Of course you harbor no disloyalty towards the Emperor," I said, strolling leisurely through the main gate, satisfied to see Xianxia instantly lose all color. "You merely wish to be the supreme power behind the throne. Why replace a compliant emperor? Why, are you alive?" Qiaoyue's voice trembled with fear as she stared at me in disbelief. "Did you really think your amateur assassins could make me die obediently?" I smiled, drawing my sword to point at her. "You call me a brute who only knows fighting and marching, yet you couldn't even find decent killers." He Junxing had already fainted when the Crown Prince guards beside him drew their swords. Xianxia looked at him, then at me, her eyes instantly reddening as she screamed. "Why? You said you loved only me. You said you would let me go. Why must you harm me now?" Her voice was hoarse with rage, eyes bloodshot, accusing me as if suffering the ultimate betrayal. I watched her revolting spectacle calmly, a mocking smile curling my lips. "The one I love is my wife, Qiaoyue, not you, this usurper." The events of the March 20th wedding feast became the capital's new hot gossip. The Chief Minister fell, dragging down half the civil officials. The court was critically short-handed, recalling many officials suppressed or exiled by the Chief Minister's faction. The Vice Minister of Judicial Review, having endured humiliation for years thinking the heavy burden was finally lifted, found himself buried under a mountain of case files instead. The Emperor, finally uprooting a major concern since his accession, seemed rejuvenated on the throne. After all, the plan the Crown Prince, the Emperor, and I devised after the Mid-Autumn banquet hadn't anticipated such a swift victory. The Imperial Astrologer's guise was crucial. The young Imperial Astrologer did possess genuine skill, but the Emperor wasn't truly swayed by celestial omens. Besides, the astrologer was primarily sought by the Crown Prince to counter that system. In the judicial prison, I saw He Junxing and Xianxia again. Or rather, He Chen and Xinwan. Xinwan, eyes bulging with fury, pointed at the young Imperial Astrologer and roared at me. "He's the charlatan I hired! You actually believed he was the Imperial Astrologer? You ancients are so superstitious!" The young astrologer peeked out from behind the Crown Prince and said, "Oh, you mean the guy who couldn't even read a star chart? I dumped him in a ravine." The young astrologer was named Su Mian, a genuine adept skilled in astrology, divination, and the 5 elements. He instantly recognized the system attached to He Junxing was alien to this world. I pressed my sword to Xinwan's throat and asked if she had any last wishes. She stared at me with venom for a long time, then finally mocked. "Can you do it? Xianxia died once before your eyes. Can you bear to kill her again?" "You're right. I can't," I admitted with a sigh, then instantly swept my sword to He Chen's neck. "So I'll just have to kill this thing first." Xinwan began cursing again, noisy like He Chen. No wonder they were a match. After cursing for a long time, she paused for breath. I asked the question I always wanted answered. "Why Qiaoyue? Why kill her?" Xinwan rolled her eyes. "No reason. I just picked one I liked. When the system transmitted me here, I saw you and her out walking. I couldn't possess a man, so it had to be her. Blame your bad luck." In the end that day, I forcibly pressed their heads together to complete the final bow of their wedding ceremony. Then, as they were about to leave this world, I trapped their souls using a fate plate. Su Mian crushed the system. He said within an hour, the memories of the original He Junxing and Qiaoyue would return, and the arrest of the chief minister's faction would be rationalized by the world's self-correction. I was indifferent to this, merely contemplating how best to torment the two souls within the fate plate. I obtained the fate plate by trading the evidence I gathered for the vice minister. It was supposedly acquired during a past confiscation. I then took various soul-tormenting items from the imperial treasury and stored them in the Taoist temple. I have a rough idea where your ladies and He Junxing souls are. Once collected, I can use this fate plate of the outsiders to send them into reincarnation. The karma of this life won't carry over. Their next lives will be peaceful and smooth. Su Mian said this, handing me 2 talismans. Soul-gathering talismans. Use them if you accidentally scatter their souls before they die here. At first, I meticulously stripped Xinhuan's spirit body down to the bone, watched it regenerate, and repeated the cycle endlessly. Eventually, I grew weary and made He-Chin do it. I told him he didn't have to. He could take her place and be sliced 1,000 times instead. So now, I watched He-Chin peel strips from Xinhuan's spirit body. He would grin at me obsequiously, seeking approval. Then I would release Xinhuan's restraints, watching her pounce and slice He-Chin 1,000 times in turn. They cursed each other, like fighting rats, clawing and biting. Initially it was amusing. Later, it became tedious. The Crown Prince suggested I subject them to the torments of the 18 hells, one by one, since they would dissipate upon leaving the fate plate and couldn't enter hell. I agreed. But by the time Su Mian returned, I had only subjected them to the 11th layer. Both talismans were used. Su Mian said it was time for Qiaoyue to pass on. That night, the moon was bright, stars sparse, cicadas sang incessantly. Xinhuan didn't even have time to scream before dissolving into the void. In her place appeared my Qiaoyue. She smiled, raising her hand to touch my face. I stood motionless, watching her, knowing this was our last meeting in this life. In her next life, whoever she became, she would no longer be my Qiaoyue. I never left Yanmen Pass again. Not even when Mu Jing ascended the throne. I constantly thought of following Qiaoyue in death. But duty to family and country weighed on me. I could not die lightly. Only on the battlefield, facing enemy lines, would I hope for a formidable foe to fight to the death with. Then I could go find Qiaoyue and boast. That enemy general was mighty skilled, but your husband didn't let him take a single advantage. My hope never came to pass. Gradually, the borders expanded. Yanmen Pass knew no more war. I was glad, yet remembered I hadn't died. 1 year, I met Su Mian again. His appearance was unchanged, though he didn't remember me. I didn't reminisce, only asked if he knew when I would die. He looked at me for a long time and said, "You are blessed with immense merit and long-lasting fortune. It will be difficult for you to die. Better to do more good deeds. Since you're alive anyway, perhaps there will be a pleasant surprise." So I opened several new clinics, schools, and martial arts halls in the Yanmen fortress towns. I wrote to Mu Jing, asking him to devise ways to enrich the northern frontier. Occasionally I escorted merchants from Yanmen Pass for trade in Qidan and Xi territories. I didn't know if this counted as good deeds, but the northern lands did become prosperous. I had almost forgotten about wanting to die when I died in an avalanche in the north. My final good deed was lifting the 2 children I had just rescued high above the snow, hoping they might survive. Freezing to death was rather embarrassing. After all, during that winter hunt, I leaped through snowy forests without a scratch. Today, just helping search for lost children, and I die so casually. But it didn't matter. Because the moment I died, I saw Qiaoyue. She still wore the wedding gown I dressed her in, standing in the vast white snow like a burning flame, vivid and radiant. I started crying the moment I saw her, holding her tight as I wept. "Why are you still here? Why haven't you reincarnated?" Qiaoyue smiled gently, comforting me like a child. "I was waiting for you. Didn't I say? I will wait for you. No matter how long." I don't know how long we embraced. The howling blizzard ceased, replaced by the sound of water and an approaching boat. A river appeared before us. Su Mian approached, poling the boat. Hello, I am your pleasant surprise. Board the boat. The fate of this life is not exhausted. Let it be continued in the next.